All right, welcome. Today, we're going to jump right into a crash course on data analytics. How do we take this massive, confusing pile of data and turn it into something that actually makes sense, something we can use? So let's get into it. It's kind of wild when you stop and think about it. Data is, well, it's everywhere. I mean, from the second you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, some system somewhere is collecting data. Your phone, that fitness watch, what you stream online, how you get to work, even how you sleep. It's all just constantly creating data all the time, whether we're paying attention or not. And that really brings us to the big question, right? What in the world do we do with all of it? I mean, how do we keep from just drowning in this flood of information and actually use it for something good? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
Okay, so to even begin to answer that, we've got to make sure we're all on the same page. Let's start with the most basic building block.
First things first, let's get this straight. There's a huge difference between data and information. Think of data like a single, lonely Lego brick. It's just a raw fact, a name, a date, a number. By itself, it doesn't mean much. But when you start snapping those bricks together, giving them context and structure, that's when you build something useful. And that, my friends, is information.
All right, so data itself comes in a few different flavors. The first one is what we call structured data. This is the good stuff, the neat and tidy kind. Picture a perfectly organized spreadsheet, right? Everything has its place in a nice, clean row and column. It's super organized, and computers and analytics tools, they absolutely love this stuff because it's so easy for them to read and work with.
And then you've got the total opposite, unstructured data. This is the wild, messy, real-world stuff. We're talking photos, videos, audio files, the text in your emails. There's no neat and tidy box for it. It's way, way harder to analyze, for sure. But here's the thing. This is often where the real gold, the richest human insights are buried. And, of course, there's a middle ground. That's semi-structured data. So it's not as rigid as a spreadsheet, but it's not a complete free-for-all like a photo. It uses things like tags or markers to give it some kind of structure, some kind of hierarchy. If you've ever looked at a chunk of code or an HTML file, that's a perfect example. It's got some organization, which makes our lives a whole lot easier. Okay, so we've got all this data now, structured, unstructured, the whole shebang. But how do we actually do anything with it? Well, the answer lies in a process, a whole strategy really, called business intelligence. You'll hear it called BI for short.
And it's really important to get this. BI isn't just one tool you buy. It's the whole process. It's the strategy of digging into all your data, what's happened in the past, and what's happening right now, to find those little nuggets of wisdom, those insights that help you make much, much better decisions down the road.
So what does that process actually look like? Well, it breaks down into a few logical steps. First, you've got to collect all that messy, raw data and clean it up. Then you really start digging in. You analyze it, looking for patterns and trends. But, a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet is kind of useless to most people. So the next step is to visualize it. Turn it into charts and graphs so it's crystal clear. And that leads to the final and, honestly, the most important step, using that newfound clarity to actually take action and make a decision.
Okay, so we've got the process down. But what about the tools you actually use to do all this? Let's take a look at a really popular one that brings this whole process to life. Microsoft's Power BI.
At its core, Power BI is basically a toolkit that's built to handle that entire BI workflow we just talked about. Its whole job is to help you take huge amounts of data, get it organized, analyze it, and then, most importantly, turn it into visuals that actually tell a story.
So what can you actually do with it? Well, you can connect to pretty much any data source out there. You can transform and model that data to make sense of it. Of course, you can visualize the results with all sorts of charts and graphs. And one of the coolest parts is you can actually ask it questions in plain English. Let's peek under the hood at the different parts that make this happen.
The first piece of the puzzle is Power Query. Think of this as the muscle of the operation. It's the part that goes out and grabs your data from, wherever it is. Spreadsheets, databases, websites, you name it. And then it helps you clean it all up, transforming that messy, raw stuff into something clean and organized that you can actually work with.
Next up, we have Power Pivot. If Power Query is the muscle, this is the brain. This is where you really put on your detective hat. It lets you build data models, which is just a fancy way of saying you teach it how different pieces of your data relate to each other. This is also where you write formulas and create new calculations to uncover those deeper patterns.
And finally, there's Power View. This is the artist, the storyteller. This is the part that takes all that complex analysis and turns it into a story that anyone can understand. We're talking interactive charts, maps, graphs, things that make your insights jump right off the screen. No data science degree required.
So let's recap. We've gone from just raw facts through a whole process using a specific set of tools. But what's the end result? What does the final output actually look like? Well, usually the final product comes in one of two flavors, a report or a dashboard. Here's an easy way to think about it. A report is like a book. It's a deep dive with multiple pages of details, all about one specific data set. A dashboard, on the other hand, is like the book's cover or maybe the table of contents. It's a single page, your mission control view that pulls the most important highlights from all your reports so you can see the big picture, just at a glance. And really, that's what this is all about. At the end of the day, the entire journey from that huge, confusing ocean of data all the way to a clean, polished dashboard, it all has one single purpose: to tell a clear story, a story that lets you or your team or your company make smarter, faster, and just more confident decisions. So remember that question from the beginning? What do we do with all this data? It can feel like the $64 million question, right? It can feel totally overwhelming. But it's not impossible. Now you know the basic building blocks, the types of data, the process for making sense of it, and the kinds of tools that can help. You've basically got a treasure map to start finding the answers. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. Now that you have this framework in your head, what story is hiding in your data, just waiting to be told? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.